Hi everyone, welcome to Mashion. Today we are going to be doing a creators roundtable after show in collaboration with Nest.io. They had their 0 to 1 Disrupt conference earlier, and one of the panels was with creators from around Pakistan that we love. You can watch that roundtable on their Facebook page. Today, we're going to be joined by a few of those panelists. So we have Shahana Jan, Anam Hakeem, Safaa Rauf, Shehzad, Ghias, and Kanwal Ahmed, all of who we're really excited to talk to about what content creation is like in Pakistan, the future of content creation, what it's like working with brands and their own individual struggles with brands, and also what a platform like Nest has given them and the kind of opportunities they get. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Safaa Rauf, and I am a digital marketeer. I am the CEO of a digital marketing agency called Mad Media, and I'm also the CEO of my travel retreat company called Utopia Retreats, and also sometimes dabble into, being a travel blogger.
Great. Hi, Safa. So we're just going to jump right in. And one of the big hot topics at the roundtable was working with brands and how there's always a back and forth with brands. You work with brands, I'm sure, as a content creator through Utopia Retreats and also because of your agency. So a lot of the panelists were saying, they would rather brands unko control दें, unko creative control दें, ताकि, they can make their original content, that it resonates with their audience, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But why do you think brands are so resistant when it comes to relinquishing control?
Because, of course, people sitting in the brand side or the agency side don't understand that every platform has its own benefits and has its own ways of doing things. We are just sort of replicating the TV market, and we want each influencer to, kind of do the same thing. Plus, at the same time, the brand guidelines are so strict that they themselves basically become red for the brand that you're working with. It has to be that red. You can't have like just a red scarf, or you can't have like a red background, or you cannot even decline to wear red. You just have to do it the way they're saying it, because that's exactly how they're imagining it. And they kind of just get very strict about it, even though honestly, as a content consumer, somebody who is consuming content, it doesn't matter if the person is wearing red or pink for the brand. All that matters to me is what kind of information is this influencer giving me that is adding value to my life. And if I wanted to see ads, I'd be watching TV, I'd be watching YouTube, I'd be watching Facebook. But I chose to come on Instagram and follow a certain person because I want to take their opinion, not have the same thing repeated by 10 different influencers on my feed. So I think this brands generally don't like to experiment so much, and they want to stick to the letter basically.
How do we tell brands, okay, this is not going to work? I mean, I remember, so I have a background in marketing. I've worked at agencies before too. So I know that one thing that I was always taught, it's not so much return on investment, it's return on engagement, right? So how do we kind of educate brands, okay, yeah, they know their audience, let them do, and who is the right person to educate brands and agencies on this?
I think all three parties have a significant role in understanding how we can take this kind of marketing ahead. First of all, let's talk about the brand. If the brand is a locally built brand, they will obviously look towards their agency to educate them. And obviously, there's a lot of ego here. I'm sure you know, because you've worked in an agency before and you've worked in the different departments. There's a lot of ego. So when an agency sort of tells the brand, hey, listen, this is not how things are running right now, this is how things are running, and it will be beneficial to you, they kind of just take it very personally. So I think it has to be a balance. The brand needs to understand that they need to try new things, and instead of investing like millions, maybe something we call in the digital sort of market is A and B testing. So maybe you can try 10 influencers doing the thing that you want to do, and then the agency can suggest, let's do 5 influencers doing something very different, and let's see which ones will engage, which kind of influencers and which kind of marketing will actually get better engagement. On the other hand, influencers, I feel like, should also unite. There should be sort of like an influencers association where all influencers understand what kind of work they need to say no to and what kind of work they need to say yes to. They have to understand that they need to have something in written, they have to be registered taxpayers, they have to understand what are the rules of influencer marketing. You have to write about it. Every influencer needs to understand that they have a lot of power. They need to start declining tacky work, they need to start declining work that does not give them creative control. And only then I think we all can come to a point where we're sort of churning out better work, so that when you go on a Pakistani's Instagram, you don't just see like a jingle being sung for like 10 seconds and like weird animation sort of splattering on the screen. I think that kind of work is very kiddish, and it's not worth the money that they're even giving out to these influencers.
Do you also think, I mean, I know that you have an agency yourself, but do you also think that if influencers started working directly with brands and kind of cut out that middleman agency wala, do you think that would change things?
I think I did think about it once. Now you need to understand when a brand manager or like a digital marketing manager at a brand side, because I've done that before, is handling 100 influencers. It's a very different story. And clients have agencies for a reason, so that execution can take care of. And there's not only one person in agency. There's always a team behind the agency. So I think having the only con of having a middleman such as an agency is that the agency is probably quoting a different amount of money that the influencer is charging. There's always like a buffer that most agencies sort of charge. But I think having an agency also has its pros, such as we understand the terminology that the brand is kind of trying to explain, that hey, listen, we need to go on always on, we need to have sort of let's be impression driven, let's be reach driven, let's not be sort of clicks driven or anything. And the influencer who might not have that much knowledge and they only understand some of it and they're just really good at creating content, I think the agency sort of acts like a middleman, and it's beneficial.
So, Safa, there was something that you said in the roundtable that I found really interesting. You said you want Utopia Retreats to kind of be a bridge between Pakistani influencers and international brands. And I thought that was a really interesting concept, it's an opportunity that I feel Pakistani content creators don't really have. But how do you think, how do you think that'll work and how do you think that'll pan out? But then also, how do you think Pakistani brands and the audience will react to that when they see their influencers promoting international brands that, for example, are not available in Pakistan? How do you think the audience will react to that?
I would say how it will pan out is, for example, I just don't mean international brands by clothing or like shoe wear or anything like that. Having an international collaborating with an international hotel chain or international airline is great for a Pakistani influencer. I'm actually one of those Pakistani influencers who collaborated with Emirates. Like this was 3 years ago, and for me, having to represent a Pakistani working with a UAE brand was great, and I got a great response on that because it's kind of proud to see that a Pakistani is being, involved in international campaigns. So I think there will how we want it to work out is that in like Pakistani influencers to go to international countries, showcase their own traditions and showcase our own cultures and everything, but at the same time work with international brands and show them the capabilities of a Pakistani, and at the same time show them that there is a huge potential for this Pakistani market. I, as a travel blogger, have tried collaborating with international hotel chains so many times, and most of the time the response I've gotten is Pakistan is not our market because it is a poor country. People will not come to this hotel. People cannot afford it. We need to actually showcase that yes, Pakistanis also have a lot of money. Pakistanis do have a lot of, they do take holidays. Of course, it's a privilege, but there is a market. We need to make that happen. On the other hand, I feel like how it will be received, I think anything that right now is being received very negatively in Pakistan, if you even collaborate with like a local brand, they will constantly nitpick and be like, why are you collaborating with them? People are dying because of COVID and you are here selling clothes. This is how the Pakistani audience has become, because of how frustrated we are, because of how underdeveloped we are. But there is no harm in promoting international brands as well, because honestly, look at us. The computers we're using are not Pakistani made. The cars we're using are not Pakistani made. The phones we're using are not Pakistani made. Then what's the point of not collaborating with a Pakistani cosmetics brand? It doesn't mean that Pakistani we should be supporting Pakistanis no matter what the quality is. Recently, like I don't this was like 2 years ago, everybody was like, oh, support Pakistani cinema, go watch Pakistani films. I, on the other hand, said I will support Pakistani cinema if they make good movies. You can't just beg people to come and buy tickets for your movies just because you're locally made. I can probably buy a ticket once, I'll go back and I will never watch that movie again, and I will spread bad sort of rep around it because you haven't really done a good job. So you can't really get away with the fact that, oh, you're local. You should be doing good work and you should be producing quality. So I think that's how I see it in the longer run for Utopia and international brands.
I just wanted to ask one last thing. We saw with the Creators Roundtable that a lot of influencers and content creators basically are on the same page. They think the same way. How do you think initiatives like 0 to 1 Conference and Nest.io and just what they do in general, how do you think this benefits content creators specifically?
Nobody really gets a degree for, nobody really understands. So you sort of, look at people, understand from people, talk to people, and then learn. So I think it's a great platform where people can come together and learn. And at the same time, it is a great platform. These kind of things we talked about is something that an upcoming influencer probably wants to understand and learn. And they go like, oh, Muzammil said that, it must be something, because of course he has so much experience behind him.
All right, Safaa, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it and hope to see more of you and even better things in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was really nice talking to you. Take care of yourself.
Thank you, you too.
Hi, I'm Shehzad Shaikh. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm host of the podcast, The Pakistan Experience, and a content creator.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you're a very, very busy, busy man with your podcast and everything.
Just because मैंने scheduling में थोड़े से issues किए, आपने आते ही मुझे ताना दे दिया.
नहीं.
I'm not a busy man. I'm a cold man these days. So
Oh.
I try and do everything in the warm part of the day.
Yeah, no, I get that. That makes sense. अच्छा तो शहजाद फौरन ही शुरू करते हैं. Anyone who knows your content, who has seen your content, your comedy or your podcast knows that you're very unapologetic in the kind of content that you create. Don't care what other people say and what other people think, and I think that's great and it's refreshing, and I think we need more of that. But one thing that you said in the roundtable is that you don't care and you're not going to change or compromise your content just to attract brands. That's not your goal, right? So फिर goal क्या है? What is the end game with the kind of content that you're making?
ये reverse psychology थी. ये मेरा जिस तरह I'm not interested in her, but actually I am. नहीं brands आप जो सुन रहे हैं, please आए मेरे पास. The idea is not to go out to make that content. उससे फिर ये होता है कि आप जिस तरह का content देख रहे हैं कि एक दुकान चलती है तो 6 दुकानें उसकी तरह बन जाती हैं. So the idea is not to attract brands. The idea is, I think, कि सब अगर वही चीज करना शुरू कर देंगे जो उनको लग रहा है कि चल रही है, जो उनको लग रहा है कि बिकेगी, तो फिर वो चीज ना लोगों को पसंद आएगी, वो चीज ना ब्रांड अट्रैक्ट करेगी, वो चीज ना ऑडियंस अट्रैक्ट करेगी. द मोर ऑनेस्ट यू आर विद योर कंटेंट, द मोर ट्रूथफुल यू आर. एंड लिबरल्स का ये लफ्ज है अनअपोलोजेटिक, जो कंजर्वेटिव्स होते हैं वो इसको बगैरत कहते हैं, बेशरम कहते हैं. तो आप जो भी कह लें, अब है यही हूं मैं और यही करता हूं. अदर देन दैट नहीं बिल्कुल स्पॉन्सर करें, ब्रांड्स आए. आई जस्ट थिंक कि सबकी जो अपनी आवाज है वो उनके कंटेंट में झलकनी चाहिए, फिर वो जैसा भी हो. जरूरी नहीं है कि हर चीज एक तरह की हो. इफ यू स्टार्ट मेकिंग कंटेंट थिंकिंग ब्रांड को ये चाहिए तो मैं ये बना रहा हूँ, आई डोंट थिंक दैट कंटेंट विल बी ग्रेट.
तो what you're also saying is कि कभी कभी ना बोलना जरूरी है for a content creator, right? Like, I mean, this is something that was talked about at the round table as well, that influencers should know कि decline कब करना है, especially when it's compromising your content. लेकिन अगर आप उस तरह करें, if you decline, do you think then that a content creator can be as successful as, for example, a content creator who's saying ठीक है to every brand? Because at the end of the day, this is their bread and butter, right? Like a lot of content creators and influencers, this is their livelihood now. They have left their typical 9 to 5 job and they are doing this. But if they then become very stubborn, not stubborn, but like वो कह दें कि नहीं हम अपना कंटेंट बिल्कुल कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं करेंगे, then can they be successful?
Anam, what's your favorite restaurant in Karachi?
Test kitchen right now.
Why? That's a phenomenal example. मुझे बिल्कुल नहीं पता था, लेकिन मैं बिल्कुल perfect example मिल गया. Why do you like Test Kitchen? How many tables does Test Kitchen have?
Very few. Very few.
कल को अगर टेस्ट किचन डॉल्मेन मॉल फूड कोर्ट में बन गया ना, आपने जाना छोड़ देना है. ठीक है. आई यूज्ड टू रियली लाइक अ सर्टेन कैफे, एंड दिस शोज कि मैं बुढ़ा हो गया हूँ. फिर ना बड़े वहाँ लाइक ये 18 to 20 year olds वहाँ आने शुरू हो गए, एंड वो स्टोर में जाने शुरू हो गए. आई वाज लाइक अब मैं यहाँ बैठ के काम नहीं कर सकता. आई स्टॉप्ड गोइंग देयर. आपकी जो ऑडियंस है ना, उससे आपका कनेक्शन एक वजह से. मसला ये है कि ये सेलिंग आउट कल्चर जो है, इन्फ्लुएंसर्स को लगता है हमें एक जगह आके सेल आउट करना पड़ेगा. अनअपोलोजेटिक आपने ऑलरेडी कह दिया, तो थोड़ी खुल के हम अगर बात कर लेते हैं. हम सब ऐसे इन्फ्लुएंसर्स को जानते हैं जिन्होंने फेमिनिज्म को ब्रांड बनाकर एक रुतबे पर आए, और फिर जब उस रुतबे पर आए तो हर इंसान जो उस मूवमेंट के खिलाफ खड़ा है, उनके हक में इन्फ्लुएंस भी हो रहा है, उनके हक में ट्वीट भी हो रहा है. उसके बाद जो ब्रांड या जो कंपनी कैपिटलिस्टिक हो, सोशल कॉन्शियस कोई ना हो, ऐसे प्रोडक्ट्स बेचता हो जो फेमिनिस्ट वैल्यूज के अगेंस्ट हो, वो भी इंडोर्स हो रहे हैं, क्योंकि ये तो हमने करना है. दे लूज देयर ऑडियंस देन, दे लूज देयर ऑथेंटिसिटी देन. एट दिस पॉइंट सोशल मीडिया पे आप जितने ऑथेंटिक होगे, आप जितने ट्रूथफुल होगे, यस आपको मासेस नहीं शायद पसंद करें, लेकिन आपकी जो ऑडियंस है ना, दैट विल स्टिक विद यू. एंड रिसेंटली वी हैव सीन विद सर्टेन इन्फ्लुएंसर्स, them refusing to work with certain brands has gained them more social media popularity. Them putting up कि यार इस brand ने हमें contact किया था and we refuse to work with them because of this, that gets them a lot more audience than that money. Yes, आप अगर काम कर रहे हैं, आपने कभी ना कभी वो चीज कैश इन करनी है, लेकिन wait for the right opportunities, stay truthful to who you are. In the long run that's better. Even in the short run, इस महीने आपको थोड़े शायद पैसे कम मिले.
हम जो कैंसल कल्चर की जो इतनी बात होती है कि ओ वी जस्ट लुक फॉर समथिंग रॉन्ग दैट समवन हैज सेड एंड बस वी कम आउट विद पिचफॉर्क्स. I also am of the opinion that that is not right, because फिर आप क्या कर रहे हैं? You are stopping them from growing, learning, evolving, right? How do we but then on the flip side of that, there are also people in our media industry who have come under fire for very serious things, yet they face no consequences whatsoever, right? We've been seeing this pretty recently also. How do you manage that? Like, I mean, should they get face consequences, but then also how do we handle cancel culture? How do you navigate between those two things then?
See, they also need to differentiate between people, right? The problem occurs when they start associating different people and lumping them all in the same category. कि अगर कोई sexual harasser है, या किसी ने misgender किया है किसी को ना जानते हुए, या किसी ने किसी स्टार को सपोर्ट किया है गलत, या किसी ने कोई लफ्ज इस्तेमाल किया है जो उसको नहीं पता था कि रेसिस्ट है. ये चार बहुत अलग चीजें हैं, और ये चार अलग अलग डब्बों में जाती हैं, और इन चार का अलग अलग repercussions या consequences होने चाहिए. When you start lumping them all together कि ये हरासर है, ये इंसान प्रॉब्लमेटिक है, इस इंसान ने 6 साल पहले एक जोक ऐसा क्रैक किया था जो रेसिस्ट था, और इस इंसान ने एक ड्रामा है जिसमें इसने एक्टिंग 15 साल पहले की थी, जिसमें इसने एक थप्पड़ खाई थी. तो ये 4 लोग सारे जो हैं अब ये प्रॉब्लमैटिक हैं और ये चारों कैंसल्ड हैं. उसमें फिर मसले आ जाते हैं कि you can't differentiate between the crimes. मतलब अगर लीगल बात भी करें, जो क्राइम होगी वो पनिशमेंट होगी ना. सो अगर हम कैंसलिंग रिजर्व करें फॉर द वर्स्ट पीपल एंड एक कंसोलिडेटेड एफर्ट हो, तो शायद उसके कोई कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस भी हों. लेकिन हर रोज लोगों को अगर नया मिर्च मसाला चाहिए कि यार आज नया कौन कैंसिल होगा, आज किसको उसके पेडेस्टल से गिराएं, ये बड़ा ऑर्डर है ना आजकल, इसको आज आज इसको तबाह करते हैं. Like that Nimra Ali girl, I mean, she got famous, but look at where she's coming from. Yeah, look at her background, look at the culture she's grown up in. If she's used a racist term, it's not because Nimra Ali is a terrible person. It's because the culture she's grown up in is not the greatest, where that word has been normalized. So our fight should be against the use of that word, not Nimra Ali. A lot of times we focus on the individuals rather than the issues. So issues पे focus करें, और canceling, just think of that as capital punishment online, to reserve that for the worst people.
But you talked about canceling, and this reminds me of the conversation that you and Muzammil were having at the round table about banning culture, the government's role in this. And then there was something interesting Pakistan kind of got its start a little late because of the ban of Facebook, YouTube, वगैरह वगैरह, right? Okay, fine, हमारा थोड़ा late शुरुआत हुई है, but now we are at a space where we are seeing so many people coming into this industry, into this digital content creation field. People are now having, like, more people are now getting into podcasts as well. Where do you see the future of this industry in the next maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years even?
The industry will grow. Whether every person will grow या वही रहेगा, जिस तरह elite capture होता है, इंडस्ट्री में भी elite capture है कि जो बड़े बड़े प्रोडक्शन हाउसेस हैं वो चलते रहेंगे, वो वही कंटेंट बनाते रहेंगे, उसी तरह बनाते रहेंगे, and we're not really going to see a boom where different content creators also get successful. उसका आप कुछ नहीं कह सकते, बिकॉज कभी भी गवर्नमेंट इंटरवेंशन हो गई, चीजें बैन हो गई, चीजें बंद हो गई, तो सिरे से चीज रुक जाती है. कि लेट्स से अगर अभी किसी ने 50 लाख इन्वेस्ट किए हैं यूट्यूब में, स्टूडियो बनाया हुआ है, चीजें खरीदी हुई हैं, इक्विपमेंट लिया हुआ है, कल को यूट्यूब बैन कर दिया उठाकर, you're going to lose out on all of that. So उस चीज को कोई नहीं प्रिडिक्ट कर सकता, वो चीजें ना हो. This is why I'm very against banning, I'm very against any restrictions. Yes, absolutely, hate speech unacceptable है, लेकिन हम इदारे देखें जो ये restrictions लगाते हैं, उनकी हिस्ट्री देखें वो किस तरह से वेपनाइज करते हैं ये लॉ कंटिन्यूसली अगेंस्ट पीपल, तो उसी तरह करेंगे ना, उस तरह नहीं होने देना. So yes, as you're an artist, you're a content creator, please stand for freedom of speech, please stand for content creators, and please be against banning of any sorts.
So then when you see platforms like Nest and the 0 to 1 Disrupt conference and how they kind of brought all these different creators together to kind of promote open dialogue, right? How do you think these kind of platforms then help content creators and change the way that content creators will work? And also you personally, how have these conferences like affected you personally?
I think it's important to have conversations. A lot of times हम लोग सारे अपने बबल में कंटेंट बना रहे होते हैं without really realizing कि और लोग क्या कर रहे हैं. So just sit together and be like, oh, where are you at? Like Shahana and I were on the content creators panel, and I've known Shahana for a while, but again, you don't have the time to talk to everybody all the time. तो हम जब reacquaint हुए content creators panel पे, उसके बाद we started talking, उसके बाद we also did a podcast together, which was phenomenal. So just bringing people together and having these conversations are important. You mentioned Muzammil. We disagree on a bunch of things. तो अगर मुजम्मिल की ऑडियंस है जो उनको सुनती है, मेरी ऑडियंस है जो मुझे सुनती है, मेरी वजह से वो आए, मेरी ऑडियंस, उनकी वजह से उनकी ऑडियंस आए, उनकी ऑडियंस को मेरा पर्सपेक्टिव मिला, मेरी ऑडियंस को उनका पर्सपेक्टिव मिला.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today, Shehzad. I know थोड़े technical issues हो रहे थे बीच में, but चलता है, हम लोग हमें आता
No,
है.
thank you so much, and I'm quite happy that you said this was the best of all the ones you've done.
Yes, it was. All right, chalo, take care and good luck with everything that you do. All
Thanks,
right?
Anam. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Shahana. I am an actor and a digital content creator, amongst many other things. I always say that I'm a multi-hyphenate artist because I do a little bit of a lot.
Great. So And so do you think that it's also possible, and I think it is with your content also, that you can have a mix of both in your content, where you can have something that kind of serves as, not, I mean, I wouldn't say escapism where you completely forget about what's going on, but you can give them that kind of socially responsible content, but in a way that's more digestible and that's a little more easy for them to kind of understand. Like, do you think that's also
Well, I think it also comes down to like what we mean when we say socially responsible, because to be socially responsible is to take your audience into account, right? Like, what am I creating and how is it affecting my audience? For me, the person that I am, I rarely think about how is it affecting my audience that is going to help them evolve versus like, this is what my audience expects of me, you know? And honestly, most of the times it just comes because of the way that I always say, like, I have to personally experience what I'm saying or doing online in order for it to come out in a truthful manner. So, I mean, yes, I feel like at least the digital sphere is the only sphere I feel where every single person can define the tone of what they do. You know, so for example, for someone like me, while I, again, like I said, I do a lot of comedic stuff. And a lot of people might be like, okay, well, she's that funny girl, so like let her stick to that. For me personally, like I always pepper it with things that are a little more thought-provoking. And you know, the interesting thing about the way that I do it is that I never, ever, 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 ever create content with the purpose of relaying a message, right? Like I never start with the message or the theme. Do you understand? You know, when creating, it's not like, okay, this is the message, feminism is the message, or this is the theme, and this is, you know, most of the things that I create, it first starts with like, what is the incident that incited it? You know, what was the thing that happened? And then as I develop that, then the message comes out as commentary. It's not, and that's why it's like the way it comes out is, it's not preachy. It's just like, this is just a way, this is something that I've experienced, and clearly you've experienced it as well. And that's why, I mean, I see that in the way that it's been received.
right. I always feel that, you know, as the audience, we find content creators, especially in the digital sphere, to be much more accessible than your typical celebrities, film celebrities, and all that. So I can, you know, sometimes see that the audience can get quite demanding when in terms of receiving that kind of content that they're getting from their creator, right? So how do you manage to, you know, recharge, take a break, you know, because I feel like that's something that's important for everyone, because at the end of the day, everyone is going through the same thing that all of us are, right? We're all going through this global pandemic. So how do you kind of take that break and recharge and get new ideas and refuel yourself while also appeasing your audience if, for example, there's no content that's coming out? How do you manage that?
I think like the honest truth is that I never think about appeasing my audience. Like, it's the truth. I never sit down and go like, how can I make my audience happier? Or how can I make things that will make them feel good? And there's nothing wrong with that approach. Like, I know a lot of creators that are like, I want to bring joy to my audience and I want to make them think this and feel this. And that's totally fine. But I personally I just don't do that. And if that's the purpose versus connecting with people or appeasing people, then whenever I create, it's going to come from a place of no pressure. It's going to come from a place of, I'm just doing this for me.
And then do you think it's important then to be, excuse me, it's important to be transparent with your audience? For example, I mean, you know, we get so caught up in the live, in like Instagram and the world that Instagram portrays. And then on days where you're not feeling productive, you're not feeling creative, do you think it's important for creators to be transparent with their audience? Of course, some will choose to and some will not choose to, but do you think that's important to showcase to your audience that, hey, you know, this stuff, it can take a toll on you. There's a lot going on, you know. Do you think it's important to do that?
I would have to say, I feel like it is each creator's own prerogative. Like, I think that if it comes naturally to you to share that with the world, then do it. If I were to share that information only because I thought that this was the thing that influencers do, then I'm doing it for the wrong reason. Because everything, sadly, even emotions and values are hashtagable, right? So let's say that I am going through an emotional breakdown. If I'm coming to Instagram to talk about my emotional breakdown so that it trends, that's problematic, because then I'm feeding into the system. But if I truthfully want to talk about it in a realistic way, and by doing so it's connecting with people, then that's fine. I don't think that there's any problem with that. So I think that transparency in the digital world is all about personal comfort. I don't show a lot of my personal life because I don't think I need to, right? I don't think I need to at all. But having said that, when I feel like I mean, for example, this year, 2020 is the year that I developed anxiety. I never had anxiety before this. So this was something that was new to me. And the moment I had a panic attack, I didn't go on to Instagram the very next day and go like, hey guys, I had a panic attack. What's up? I dwelled in it because it was happening to me. And when I felt comfortable enough to talk about it, I wrote about it. And it's an extremely cathartic thing to do as a digital creator, to write about something you're going through. Or if you want to create a video about something that's deeply personal, again, that's totally the creator's prerogative to decide how they want to relay what's happening in their personal lives. But I just think that it really comes down to how you're doing it and why you're doing it. For me, everything comes down to the why when exposing yourself.
You also mentioned in the roundtable feeling a little bit removed from everyone else just because you're based in the West and everyone else was based in Pakistan. What do you think? How do you think that's helped you? How do you think being there has helped you? And what do you think? How do you keep up with what the Pakistani audience is going through? How do you keep up with?
So the experiences that I had growing up in Pakistan are, may or may not be similar to a lot of people who are still in Pakistan. So therefore, I do come from a place of authority because I lived there my whole life, basically, right? Or at least the majority of my life. So nothing I say or do is coming from a place that, oh, she lives abroad, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Because I found it really funny because I made this video. It was called That Guy. It was basically the patriarchy song. And a woman commented on it from the US, and she said, oh, she lives in the US, she doesn't know what we're dealing, and very and she's like, the US, and she actually said that the US does not deal with the patriarchy. And I'm like, girl, you have no idea, and I've had men tell me on Instagram, they say things like, you live abroad now, stop trying to corrupt our women. And I always laugh because I'm like, I'm not trying to corrupt your women, I'm trying to corrupt my women because that's where I'm from, but at the same time, because I do live abroad and I don't, for example, maybe if I lived in Pakistan, maybe I would mingle more with the bloggers and the influencers, or I would be more like front facing with the brands, etc. And when you live in Pakistan, you're under, and again, I grew up there, so I know this, like when you're under, especially if you're in the media, because I've been in the media like my whole life now, you are under so much more like hyper focus. And Instagram, for example, has given a platform for the average woman to get up and just create and say things, so for example, I run a page called Penhood, and all of our creators are women that live in Pakistan and they're creating there. So I think that the moment a hater knows that you are creating in Pakistan, they will come at you, because we have this mentality that, okay, if she's gone abroad, then she's kind of a little bit out of reach, but when you're in Pakistan, they will come at you with a fury because, you live there and they expect you to be a certain way. When it comes to creating here, I think that honestly, it's just simply the fact that I have the freaking freedom to do whatever I want to do. And without fear of judgment. I live without fear of log kya kahenge. I live without fear of sharam nahi aati. I as a human being, again, I always say to each, his or her own. I don't ascribe to these values anymore, because I think that the idea of sharam or the idea of log kya kahenge has done more damage to my life than it has helped. So because I've removed those things from myself, I'm able to just not give a shit and just create whatever I want to create. And yes, I understand, like, I'm self-aware enough to see the privilege in that, because I live in a home or in an environment where nobody is coming to point anything out to me. Maybe if I lived in Pakistan, I would hear it more. कि नहीं नहीं ये content तुम नहीं release कर सकती.
So, now we see that even in Pakistan, influencers and content creators, it's really this industry has grown. Why is it that our audience expects influencers and content creators and even celebrities to talk about everything? Why do you think that audiences expect that? And I think Shehzad also mentioned this in the roundtable. Okay, if you're talking about Kashmir, then why aren't you talking about this? If you're talking about this, why aren't you talking about that? Why do you think the audience expects that?
A lot of them feel like you are in a position of influence, and maybe by talking about this, you will be able to generate actual change. For example, the case about the recent case about the little Christian girl who was married off. So social media had a huge part to play with that, because like people were galvanized to talk about it and create actual change. So I personally think, and I've done it many times, like there have been issues that I have seen that have made my blood boil, and I felt compelled to say something. But I'm a human being. Not everything speaks to me the same way. And it doesn't mean that someone else's issue is lesser than, but I think the audience needs to have a little more compassion, that they are forgetting that we are human beings. Often what happens, it happened just today, insane amounts of DMs asking us to talk about something or do something. And a lot of times we'll get DMs with videos without trigger warnings, and I'll click on a video and it's something horrendous. Do it because it actually means something to you, not because it's an opportunity to gain traction.
All right, thank you, Shahana. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I think it's past midnight over there or something like that. But
12:35.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi guys, I am Anam and I am a traveler by passion, and by profession I am a brand strategist, and I've been a digital marketer as well. Most of the time people know me as a traveler because that is my internet persona.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anna. We're so happy that you can make some time to be with us and speak with us. So we're just going to get started right away. One of the things that we saw in the roundtable is this idea that creators also have a sort of persona. Patangir spoke about how they always have this persona of a happy couple. They're upbeat, they're chirpy, but of course that is just one side of the picture. The reality, this is just 20% of their life that they're showing on social media. But होता ये है कि audience sometimes believing कि ये लोग हमेशा ही ऐसे होते हैं. So how do you think, is it important for content creators to show the real side of their lives also? Okay, we have days where we're not upbeat, where we struggle with certain things. Yeah, do we then educate the audience कि भाई, this is my persona, just the same way एक actor होता है, उसका एक role होता है. What do you think is the right way to go about this?
Okay, this is one of the most interesting and most debated topics. Influencers bring it up every now and then. So I think this question has several different angles. Number one is the angle of being authentic or authenticity and its importance, right? So yes, if somebody is a very outgoing and extroverted personality content creator, and that is what they show up most of the time, but definitely they're humans, so they have their low days or they have their vulnerabilities and bad things that happen. So I think it is very important for creators to every now and then do share that side, like for them to share that side, and also to remind people that, they are also living a normal human life, and they're also going through all of those experiences. But having said that, you know, as humans, we are not very comfortable opening up about our vulnerabilities very openly. If, for example, I have, let's say, just experienced a failure in one area of my life, it is really a question of how much are you comfortable to share openly, because it might affect your work. You might have your client sitting on the other end, you might have your prospective client sitting on the other end. So how much vulnerability do you want to show? That is also sometimes a bit of a question mark. Also, sometimes creators take this approach that they pick up a point in time from their life, several years ago, when they went through something. So maybe at that time they were not very comfortable of sharing it because it had just happened and it had repercussions. But now looking back, as they have healed from it, so now they're ready to talk about it. So it's great. Different people do it in different ways. If a content creator has a certain personality or a persona, so they also look at themselves as a brand, and the basics of brand management, or the basics of branding, it says that you have to kind of stick consistently to a certain persona, which is, it is your 100% authentic self, or it is, maybe 80% of a crafted personality. But if you have decided that this is what my brand is about, if my brand is about colorful or vibrance, colors of vibrance, then your audience start expecting that. So you also have to stick to it in terms of a voice, or in terms of you being as personal brands. So it has that angle as well. But yeah, it's like, it is always a discussion on what is the best approach. I think it's a mix.
So, Anam, earlier, a few weeks ago, I believe you shared a post on your Instagram where you said that you are now focusing more, especially when it comes to travel, you're focusing more on experiences rather than checking things off a list, like counting off countries or cities or etc. Why did you make the change? How do you think this is going to affect the content that you're going to be creating going forward? And why do you think it's very important to kind of make this change in a year like 2020 where so much has happened?
Yeah, great question. So, I think this change has come over a period of time. As I've traveled in past years, I have sort of evolved as a person, obviously, with time and with travel. And as I took some trips in which I stayed longer in one city or in one country, and I had the best possible time. I mean, I had equally great time, and in fact, I felt more relaxed doing it, because I was not hopping countries, or I was not hopping cities. So I saw the beauty of traveling more deeply in one place, being in one place and experiencing that place more deeply. Also, while doing that, I also understood that sometimes, you know, like, who drew these who drew these national boundaries, or who calls it one country? Like, it's a political definition, right? That we differentiate this country from the other. you know how how India and Pakistan is. There are a lot of cultural similarities. While obviously there are a lot of differences as well, but जैसे weddings होती हैं हमारी, उनकी और हमारी wedding tradition में कितनी similarity है. So you try to understand, you start understanding the world in a different manner, and you realize that you it's a futile thing to just count countries. You'd rather be making your list, or your take, like, places that you want to see in a manner of cultures, or in terms of landscape. So we all have a little tiny part in doing the best for our next generation, for climate, for environment. So I think a lot of globally, a lot of influencers are taking responsibility and talking about the fact that maybe they should be taking lesser flights, and they should be maybe taking more road trips, and maybe they should be crossing more borders over land rather than flight, and traveling slower, more in depth in one destination. So I think that that conversation has also impacted me as a traveler. Although locally we don't see that conversation happening a lot in our country, obviously, but following international creators, that approach has really hit me and inspired me. And also, I think traveling more deeply into lesser, like probably taking lesser flights, and traveling deeply is probably the way to go. So I will try my best to do that as much as possible going forward.
No, I think you're definitely right. I think if anything this year has taught us, it's to kind of slow down a little bit more and just kind of
Yeah,
इतनी भाग दौड़ की जरूरत नहीं होती हर वक्त, थोड़ा.
nahi hai, exactly.
Yeah. So coming back to when we were talking about influencers being authentic, when working with brands, typically एक brand का brief आता है जिसमें basically every influencer who is involved in the campaign has to replicate the exact same content through all platforms. Now, when you look at influencer marketing on an international or a global level, it's not done this way, right? Like we have a brand will find an influencer that fits their niche. So that relationship is also really important. And then I feel like abroad content creators are given a bit more freedom to make branded that will resonate with their audience. You mentioned in the roundtable the importance of a well-written brief. How do you think we can start implementing something like this when it comes to brands in Pakistan? How do we teach them this, and who is the right person to teach them these things?
I think for one, a lot of brand custodians in terms of marketing managers and brand managers, they are young, well-educated people like you and I, and they are also sitting on these platforms like Instagram. I think for one, um, they should have, I mean, such kind of conversations should reach to them, and they should be the ones to realize for one on their end the importance of these things. I think yeah, their process of thinking is from the angle of their corporate environment or their boardroom world. They look at it from that lens. They look at it purely from the commercial aspect, or from the aspect that, okay, we are a brand and we need to just stick to these guidelines, and those guidelines apply to each and every creator as well. So coming at they're just coming on this creator world from that angle. I think for one, they should also pick up on such kind of conversations, and they should realize from the other side that how did these influencers and these creators become creators or influencers with a bunch of following? Who are these fans or followers or readers?
I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So my name is Kanwal Ahmed, and I'm the founder of Soul Sisters Pakistan, a community and a safe space for women. I also host and produce a show called Conversations with Kanwal that humanizes social issues through the power of storytelling.
Hi, Kanwal. Thank you so much for joining us today. So glad you could be here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get into the question straight away. So one of the things that really stood out to me is when it comes to your show, you mentioned that it was kind of a struggle to pitch the show to a lot of different brands. You had to pitch to multiple people, and after the first season, people were more willing, but then they were like, laundry segment ad kar lein, ya ye kar lein, wo kar lein. How do we tell brands that this kind of in-your-face marketing जो होती है, it doesn't work, especially when you look at multinationals. ज़्यादातर यहाँ multinationals होते हैं. Their international counterparts don't work this way. Why do you think brands here are not understanding that? How can we show brands that, look, this isn't going to work?
Anam, this is a struggle that I've been facing for the last 6 years because I've been working in the digital industry for that long. When I even started Soul Sisters Pakistan, it was a really new concept for brands to understand that there was a community that held equal power as a lot of the traditional media outlets. And number one, getting them on board to work with us would oftentimes be a little bit of a challenge. अब जब आ जाते थे on board, तो फिर explaining to them that the same things that they'd been doing for decades would no longer work, is now the current challenge. So I honestly have no answer for this, because I see the same brands doing absolutely the opposite things in other countries. And when you come to Pakistan, the same brands are sponsoring the most regressive of dramas. Those dramas are showing domestic violence, abuse, infidelity, violence against women in so many different forms, and actually normalizing it. क्योंकि उसमें होता ये कि जब एक औरत को थप्पड़ पड़ता है या उसके साथ कुछ बुरा होता है तो वो बर्दाश्त कर लेती है, and in the next scene she pretty much forgets about it, or she shows how through the power of patience she was able to handle the situation. And the same brands that are preaching women to stand up for themselves in other countries, they have these feminist ads. Those same brands in Pakistan are sponsoring these dramas. And when you sponsor something, or when you give money to a certain show or a certain outlet to produce that kind of content, you're backing that content. You're the reason why they're able to produce it. So it's basically your fault. And I think that it's so ironic, because you're selling your product to a set of women, and you're actually doing those women more harm than good by putting on mass media what is actually absolutely against them, what is actually never going to benefit them. Of course, there are exceptions. Of course, there are multiple, companies and brands that do not go down that route. And, surprisingly, a lot of them are local brands, like Shan Foods, for example, is so pro-women. And I say that because I worked with them. And I was so pleasantly surprised at, even their senior management, that when I went to them, the first thing they said was, give us your most challenging topics. Tell us what other people would not help you produce, and we'll help you produce that.
So, Kanwal, why? I mean, you've seen that the audience has been so receptive to your show, right? And
Yeah.
Pakistan has such a huge following. So then, why is it that jab we see these kind of shows on TV that are perpetuating violence against women, or just these really archaic notions, right? How come the
Yeah.
audience isn't saying anything? Why are these shows getting so many views and so much traction? So why isn't the audience speaking up about it?
I think it's because it's normalized. I think years of showing this on TV has made us believe that it's absolutely okay, that it's absolutely normal. I often see it, even जब मैं इस चीज के बारे में लिखती हूँ तो बहुत से ऐसे comments भी आते हैं कि it's just a drama, don't take it so serious. अभी recently एक drama था, उसमें दिखाया गया था कि एक लड़की थी, she cheated on her sister by marrying her sister's husband, and obviously the sister's husband is to blame as well कि उसने भी मजे से अपनी साली के साथ affair चला लिया. But the point is that the girl at the end of it, the sister who had cheated, usko okay. And one of the girls on Soul Sisters Pakistan wrote that why is it that at the end of every drama the female villain always gets an end that is degrading the very fact that these mishaps are very common. For example, कुछ लड़की जिसने ये post लिखा था, she herself was a burn victim. She had been burned at a very young age, and she said that, am I ugly? मुझे क्या किसी चीज की सजा मिली है, इसलिए मैं burn victim हूँ? Why is it always shown कि ऐसा हादसा इसलिए हुआ क्योंकि उसको किसी गुनाह की सजा मिली थी? Because then these are things that people repeat in real life. She said कि मुझे इतने लोगों ने आके बोला है कि तुम्हारी कौन से गुनाहों की सजा है? I mean, I have no words as to why people still watch it. I think because एक ही तरह की चीज आ रही है टीवी पे, जब एक बंदा शाम को बैठता है चाय लेके, खाने के बाद टीवी खोलता है और यही आ रहा है, तो फिर आप क्या और देखेंगे? Right? You want things, you want content in local language, and there's already a dearth of it. इतना तो कोई नहीं है ना कि हमारी कोई बहुत booming industry हो, 1000 different kinds of channels हो. 3-4 तो channels हैं हमारे, उन 3-4 channels पे same किस्म की storylines आई जा रही हैं और सालों से.
But now, I feel like, Kanwal, you're in a very unique position because of Soul Sisters Pakistan and your show. You have exposure to some some of the many atrocities that happen to women in Pakistan. You know, some
Yeah.
I've seen the kind of stories that women have talked about, and I can imagine that it must take a toll on you as well and your mental health. So how do you kind of, you know, give yourself that space to recuperate and kind of make peace with everything that's going on around you? What do you do to kind of, I don't want to say keep sane, but you know, kind of keep your mental health in check and stay positive and kind of driven to keep doing this? What's your method?
I think that's an amazing question and one that's rarely asked. So thank you for asking that. And you know, a lot of people don't realize that there's also something called empathy burnout, and just people who are witnessing or reading a certain amount of, you know, content that is, you know, affecting them emotionally. It can actually lead to them slowly withering out as well. शुरू में तो मैं बिल्कुल realize नहीं करती थी, but it would affect me in different ways. Like I would get more anxious, I would be more sad, I would, because you know, it's not just what you read on the group, it's also a lot of things happening behind the scenes, a lot of people reaching out to me personally, me talking to them, and then you know, obviously every individual has their own personal life, their own challenges. So वो सब मैंने तो वैसे ही side step like कर दिया था उसको, but after a while it really started getting to me, and it would result in the form of, you know, sometimes I would get really anxious, sometimes I would feel really depressed and sad and just cry for no reason. So I started taking therapy, and that's really helped me, especially in the past 6-7 months during the pandemic. I was regularly taking therapy, like once a week, 1 hour ka session mera zaruri. Doesn't matter what else is happening in the world, that's my time to take it out.
And I mean, I think it's great that you've mentioned that, because you know, yahan pe bhi there is a taboo on therapy, and I'm so glad that you're speaking about it, because it's important. Like you said, you have to be able to take care of yourself first, then you
Yeah,
can take care of others, you know. So
absolutely.
moving away from that a little bit, coming back to, you know, how popular your platform is and your show is, you mentioned crowdfunding, right? Which I thought
Yeah.
was really interesting, and I haven't really seen a lot of crowdfunding happen in Pakistan before. So I was really curious when you mentioned that, and I know that
Yeah.
at the roundtable said that one of the reasons it's not that popular here is because there are roadblocks like digital payments. But what do you think? Like, I mean, you went through this, and obviously it was very successful for you. So what do you think are the merits of crowdfunding, and do you think our audience is receptive to that and willing to get into crowdfunding?
So I'll give you like three different scenarios, sort of scenarios. I don't know if they're scenarios though. So the first thing is कि जब मैंने भी crowdfunding का नाम सुना था पहली दफा, that was in 2018 when I was at Facebook. So at the Facebook Community Leadership Program, हमें जब grant मिल गया था, but we also had to figure out how to sustain our initiatives going forward. Facebook called the founder of Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a online platform where you can do crowdfunding, and he spoke to us about the benefits of crowdfunding. And I realized at that point that crowdfunding is extremely you know, popular in the West, specifically with artists. What crowdfunding primarily does is it gives the artist freedom and independence to express themselves. So आपको किसी के भी जो है ना chain से bind नहीं होना पड़ता. You don't have to worry about what this brand is saying or what's taboo or what should be censored. That money is given to you by your people, and the people who already believe in your work and who've seen your work and who want to hear about it. So for me, that was an extremely, like, you know, that was like freedom for me. कि ये अगर हो जाए तो क्या ही बात है. लेकिन again, पाकिस्तान में crowdfunding is यहाँ पे कोई भी crowdfunding platforms नहीं है, ठीक है. So एक तो ये था कि पाकिस्तान में रहते हुए मैं crowdfunding कर नहीं सकती क्योंकि कोई बैंक अकाउंट नहीं करता crowdfunding को accept. And number two, यहाँ पे जब लोगों को पता ही नहीं है crowdfunding क्या है, तो फिर तो लोगों को एक बहुत ही अजीब सा perception भी हो सकता है. Luckily, Soul Sisters Pakistan has women from across the world. So a large population also lives in the West. A lot of them are in Canada, North America, like the whole of North America, the UK. So when I started sharing my woes after season 2, season 3 में मुझे बहुत मुश्किल हो रहा है, you know, in finding funds and finding people. Actually, not just finding funds. Sponsorships तो मिल जाती हैं, alhamdulillah. It's just that aligning people with your values, right? Like अगर मुझे कोई brand आके कह रहा है कि आप ये वाला segment डाल दें, अपने इसमें ब्यूटी सेगमेंट डाल दें या लॉन्ड्री सेगमेंट डाल दें, तो वो मैं नहीं कर सकती पूरा। अगर कोई फेयरनेस क्रीम आके मुझे कह रहा है कि कवल हम पूरा सीजन आपका स्पॉन्सर कर देंगे, बस इसमें लिखा हुआ होना चाहिए फेयरनेस प्रेजेंट्स स्वान, कवल मैं नहीं कर सकती। these go against my values, right? या मुझे कोई ब्रांड कह रहा है कि ठीक है हम कर देंगे, आपका पूरा सेट बना देंगे, लेकिन आपके सेट में आप ये 2 टॉपिक्स के बारे में बात नहीं कीजिएगा क्योंकि ये बहुत ही टैबू टॉपिक्स हैं, तो मैं उनको एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर सकती। सो इन दैट वे लाइक values aligning is I think the most, that was for me it's extremely heartbreaking and very difficult. So and again like I said earlier कि पैसे देना भी बहुत मुश्किल लगता है लोगों को for initiatives like this. They would rather give it on very like standard content. Anyway, having said that, तो जब मैंने ये वाली चीजें express की अपनी audience को, I said this is the scene. I don't know if I'll be able to do season 3 because again a lot of people don't realize production is expensive. It's also the people involved. When I express this कि मुझे करना भी उसी quality का काम है और मुझे compromise भी नहीं करना अपनी values पे, so a lot of my North American audience said that Kanwal just start your crowdfunding page. करके तो शुरू तो करो, फिर देखते हैं आगे क्या होता है. So I, made the Kickstarter page, and one of the girls, and then I forgot about the Kickstarter page. I was like, मैं नहीं कर रही, क्योंकि तो मैं लगा दूंगी और लोगों ने मुझसे बदतमीजी की कि क्या हम पैसे दें इसके लिए, तो मैं क्या करूंगी, right? क्योंकि मुझे I thought that is what would happen. But actually, one of the girls, she really convinced me. She put in the first 10K as well. When the page was launched, there was, alhamdulillah, not a single negative comment. And people, even from Pakistan, they pledged.
Thank you so much, Kanwal. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us. It was a great conversation, and yeah, good luck with everything else.
I'm sorry for the interruptions in the slide that I was getting.
No worries. We all have our lives going on. I completely understand. You wear so many different hats, so of course it's understandable. But thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna.
Of course. All right. You take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.